of you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And thank you for the presentation. I think it's really fascinating to go into what are the legal aspects and also a couple of ethical aspects. Now I'm going to only touch upon a couple of ethical aspects, as there is also other speakers in the room, like Sofia Palmieri, who does, I think, a much better job of elaborating on these aspects. But although I don't have a lot of time to explain really all the legal aspects of the AI Act, I just wanted to really go through it and already give you my main message today is the fact that if you as a DPO or as a privacy professional and you get into the AI Act and also later on with the European Health Data Space Regulation, please do not start to fragmentize them and just see them as separate regulations that we just have to separately implement into the structure of a company, of an institution, of a research institution, of a hospital. Because you will see that they're actually quite aligned and that a number of obligations are actually really quite similar. And that if you do the exercise, and let's all be honest, I don't think anybody can say, our company is GDPR compliant, and if you are, you were a couple of years ago probably, but you still then have to reevaluate and update, and do that along with the necessary obligations under the AI Act, also within view of the European Health Data Space Regulation. I think definitely with regard to the patient rights envisioned in there on primary use, but also, and that's the part I actually helped drafting as the legal advisor of our Belgian Minister of Health with regard to secondary use. And it's about, and I will give you some key points on how you tackle this, but it's really with starting with mapping your data and setting out a strategy in order to really integrate these regulations. And then I'm never going to say it's going to be easy, because that I don't think, and it's still a lot of work, but hey, it gives us jobs. But on the other hand, it really will facilitate things, and it will become really the fact that, for example, if you do it right and you really make sure that you don't only do it from a compliance point of view, but as already pointed out by Nathan, because we still want to make sure that the patients who trust us and the data subjects who put their trust, that we really deserve the trust, that with regard to the healthcare institutions, research institutions, that we have the best care, or they have the best care to give with the new innovative techniques, and also that they have the possibility in order to then actually make sure that data can be shared for secondary use. So if you do it with those kind of things, with these advantages in mind, it's a much better exercise than just saying, oh, now we just have to do another compliance exercise. Because another point, and you will see it coming back in all the legislation, is also with regard to security, making sure you have the necessary technical and organizational measures to make sure that not only your AI system is robust enough, but your entire system is robust enough in order to be aware of cyber attacks and everything. So we go a little bit into the AI Act, and just how does the AI Act apply in healthcare? Because of course we have a number of things. We know it's a risk assessment. Well, first of all, there's a definition, of course, of what is AI. I think there are a lot of definitions with regard to more the historical way of how we came into on the definition on AI. But now there is one in Article 3, and I think it's also very important to actually interpret it along with consideration 12 of the AI Act. But I think what is more interesting, because we go into a risk analysis assessment. I'm so sorry, they're a little bit slow with the slides. Or maybe I'm just not pushing quite enough. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, maybe, thank you. Sorry, merci. So first of all, when you start doing the analysis, you have to identify the system, whether it's an AI system or it's not an AI system, and don't go too rapid in that. For example, not all profiling is done by AI. Most of it is done, but is it really an AI system? Then you have to determine the risk factor, the risk assessment, and then you also have to do stakeholder identification. As you know, you have AI systems with minimal risk or no risk, for example, spam filters. Then you have the AI systems with what is considered a limited risk, like chatbots and deepfakes. There the obligation is mainly with regard to transparency, that it must be clear for the user that it's actually he or she or they are talking to a AI rather than a person in the chatbot, for example, that it's deepfake generated by AI as such. Then we come into the high-risk AI systems, and we see a number of ones, which are the typical ones like credit scoring, college administration, and stuff like that. You see a number and much more obligations to follow. That is really with regard to the providers of the AI systems. But I will get back to the ones that then are deploying the AI system, and then we get into the hospitals, and we will get into medical institutions. It's not because you're only using the AI system that you don't want to have any obligations. That is quite along with the controller obligation. Well, they now have a deployer's obligation too, but we'll come to that. And then, of course, you have the prohibited or the unacceptable risks where, like, social scoring is one, and where we also see that, for example, where there is manipulation of the free will by subliminal techniques. Now, that's of course, and I think that's one of the main critics we have on the AI Act, that is a very broad definition. For example, let's be honest, I think a lot of us actually will buy probably more things now there, for example, on Meta Instagram. Because of the fact that we are actually triggered every time with these ads that are popping up between the messages or the pictures of our friends. One could argue, actually, with regard to this definition, that the profiling and the advertising Meta is doing through Instagram could actually be an unacceptable, fall under manipulating of the free will by subliminal techniques. But should it be an unacceptable AI system? I don't think so. So the proof of the pudding there will be in the eating, and will also be important to see how legislators, how authorities handle this, and not be, hopefully, not be too strict with this. A very important one, you should see this as a sort of default setting. This is your default risk qualification. But don't think, because we're saying, for example, here credit scoring is high risk, that it could never fall into the unacceptable risk. If all of a sudden a bank would start doing a credit scoring with regard based on ethnicity, for example, that would be, of course, unacceptable, and thus would fall in the category of unacceptable. So this is the default setting where you start from, and then I will get into healthcare, how it's defined as such. But it is maybe you can go higher. Potentially, it's always more risk, or there will be cases where you can go lower. Now, with regard to healthcare, we will fall under two provisions why most of the time AI in healthcare that has a medical purpose will probably be a high risk. I'm sorry, I still had some Dutch on the slide, but it's an AI system with a high risk. It's very good to train your Dutch, which is a very nice language. No, I'm kidding. It is when the AI system is intended to be used as a safety component of a product, or is the product itself covered by the Union harmonization legislation listed in Annex 1, and has had a conformity assessment, that's an important one, a conformity assessment by a third party, which actually means every medical device under Class 2 will be considered with a medical purpose, will be considered, but has a medical purpose, will be considered as a high risk AI system. So a dialysis machine control driven by AI, for example, the kidneys, software AI that analyzes blood results and questionnaires to generate diagnostic output. Very important, because that's a medical device, and that is a Class 2, so it will also be a high risk. when you have also access to or the use of essential private and public services and benefits. In the annex, so in the text of the AI Act, it is not stipulated what it is, but the AI Act has now also 13 annexes. Well, in Annex 1 and 3, very important for healthcare, there is really designated that also healthcare systems can fall under that. And so when an AI system is, for example, intended to evaluate and classify emergency calls from natural persons for determining priorities in the dispatch of that emergency services, that, for example, will also then be considered as an AI system high risk. Access, once again, to essential private and public services and benefits. If the AI system will assess the eligibility of natural persons for health services, it's also an AI system with a high risk. So most other health systems that do not serve a medical purpose and therefore do not fall under the definition of medical device can be considered as low-risk AI systems, or if it is only classified as a medical device, class 1. Why class 1? It's self-regulated or self-certified system. And the AI Act says, no, it should be part of, as we go back, it should be part of the component of a product or the product where the conformity assessment is done by a third party. So the class 1 could potentially be a lower risk or a limited risk, but once again, also, that's the default setting. Be careful on how you're really going to implement it in practice as such. And then it can also be said that systems that do not interact with individuals, for example, used in hospital administration, probably will be a minimal risk. However, be careful. I think this is, for example, a business intelligence tool or business intelligence AI system that can be used. I think when it comes down to invoicing, and where, for example, on the invoicing, you start determining also whether a patient is actually a good payer or not of the invoices and everything, you might actually jump into the limited risk or even the high risk AI system. So as said, use this as your default starting point, but actually apply it on the use case at hand. Very important, as you already heard, it coincides with the medical device regulation when it serves its medical purpose. So very important to also look at that part as such. Secondly, another part I haven't mentioned it in the slides, but I think it's a good one to give you. When you do start with the prototype and you actually want to test the prototype, if you do it with retrospective data, so secondary use of data, it is actually not seen as part of the clinical trial under the Medical Device Act regulation, and you're thus not yet under that regulation. So I think that's also a very important part to consider, as we will see that data is value and that the AI system is only as good as the data it is fed with. That it is important to see that you're not yet under the medical device regulation and its very stringent and strict obligations if you are testing the prototype or the system with developing the system with retrospective data. From the moment is prospective data or a combination of retrospective and prospective data, you will then fall within the scope of a clinical research under the medical device regulation, and it will apply. So there are obligations for providers, but you will see a number of those obligations actually coincide not alone with the medical device regulation as such, but coincide also with the GDPR. So it becomes very important to really comply with this. And for all the healthcare institutions, the doctors, research institutions, and you actually will trust upon a supplier's AI system, you now really have to demand that they really deliver this. And it will not only a sort of, oh, it's a nice thing to have, it's your obligation to do that due diligence. And I think you should take into consideration a marketing strategy, which I really applaud, is the fact that suppliers should be the guide for their clients, the heroes. And in the case you're actually trusting upon an AI system of a supplier, you're the hero, and your guide have to make sure that they provide you with all this in order to make your life easier. So don't do their job for them, because otherwise, if you don't do it, you will have high potential risks with regard to liability and everything. But if you start doing their job upon yours, it will become quite something. Because, and this is very new under the AI Act, I think it goes along with the GDPR, but there are also a couple of, and very important for a high risk AI systems, but we already discovered that a number of the majority of AI systems that will be used in, for a medical purpose will fall under the high risk. You have quite some obligations to meet. A sufficient level of AI literacy, technical and organizational measures. But once again, think about GDPR, you also have to do that. You have to have human oversight, and you have to be in control of the input. If you are controlling the input data, make sure that it's relevant and sufficiently representative. And then we will come back with another aspect of the GDPR, because a lot of people are talking about the fact, oh, we always have to do with AI data minimization, and we are always talking about the quantity of the data. Well, this could be a problem if we are really messing with the quantity of the data, because if the quantity of the data makes it that it's not a representative data set, we will be in trouble under the AI Act as such. What is also an important one that goes inside with the data, with GDPR, is the FRIA, is the Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment. You also now have to do, if you employ an AI system, is a Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment. Now, you will hear a session or a topic on synthetic data. We have later on, and I don't want to pitch for our session, Nathan, but we're going to do it a little bit. We also have, apologies to the other speakers, but we also have a session on anonymization and pseudonymization. Well, you will see if you do pseudonymization or you use synthetic data, for example, with regard to that secondary use in order to share data, in order to train an AI system, you will see that actually that is very beneficial, because the EDPB said once that if you are applying pseudonymization techniques and privacy enhancement techniques where you can't re-identify the data subject, actually you're already balancing the interest of the data subject towards the interest of the AI system. This is really stuff you can use within the fundamental rights impact assessment. So you see, it really comes together of making sure you know the legal requirements, you know the ethical requirements, but you also have the translation into the technical requirements. And that being said, it means that this is not an exercise only for the legals, because we will hit a wall and we will have to say, no, it is not possible. But the translation will then be possible by the technical persons. And it will not only be the technical persons, but it will also really a multidisciplinary stakeholder team that has to tackle this as such.